Hi, everyone. Welcome to Intuition Fridays, coming to you live here on the Beyond Mystic YouTube and Rumble channels. Almost every Friday. We've been holding it down, haven't we, Penny?
Yeah. Yeah, life is busy. It's
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. But we've managed to find a time to get the show happening for the last several
Yeah.
weeks, and it looks like we're going to do another one next week.
Yep.
So yes, welcome to my delightful co-host, Penny Kelly. And just take a moment here to, if you don't know about Penny's work, which I'm sure all of you do, but just in case you don't. Oh, yes. And here we go. Here we are. And you can find Penny here on her website.
Yep.
At Creating Conscious Community, where you can find her classes, her shop with books, and some information about her. And if you would like to book a session with me, you can find me here on the Beyond Mystic Consultations page, where you can book a 1-hour reading with me. These are private, recorded over Zoom. Oh, I didn't show it. I'm going to have to go back and show yours, Penny. Hold on a sec. Guess not operating on all cylinders right now. There. Is it showing? There it is.
What are you trying to show? That's my website.
Your website. Yeah. Did I show it already?
Yeah, it worked. Okay. It worked.
Oh, good.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm a little discombobulated, apparently. So, without further ado, Penny, would you introduce the topics for today and let us know what we're going to be looking at? We gave a little bit of a hint at the end of our last discussion.
Right. Actually, last two discussions, we were talking about bloodlines. Mm-hmm. And so we might dip into that a little bit because it's so rich. But the topic for today is actually the symbolism in the Adam and Eve story. And that's only, it's an intense amount of symbolism and really tells, well, you'll see. The Adam and Eve story is a powerful, powerful story that we have accepted as our creation story. And I just want you to look at, what does the symbolism in that say? Who constructed that story, and why did they construct that particular story with those particular characters? And so, we really have to begin, and I'm going to say this maybe a few times, we have to begin reclaiming our culture, our symbols, and our meanings. And you'll see when I go through the story what has happened, and you'll see it happening again right now, today. So the Adam and Eve story is not our creation story. It's a story of the last big reset. So, keep that in mind. And the stories that have evolved out of that are many, and some of them are rich with meaning, but most of the stories in the Bible are the history of the Jewish people or the Hebrew people, not necessarily Jewish, but Hebrews. And it's a fascinating story. Yes. However, it's not the only story. They were just the only people who were writing down what they were going through. Nobody else was doing that, or all of those other stories either got destroyed or co-opted or shifted some way in such a way, or hidden so that we don't know about them. But we know about the Hebrews, and it's amazing. They tell some pretty interesting things. But there's a lot of things when you read the Bible. I've read it 3 different times, from cover to cover. And my first reaction was, none of this makes sense. This doesn't strike me as coming from God at all. And that was when I was young. I think I was a teen the first time I read it. And then I read it later, the second time, and I thought, okay, this still doesn't make a lot of sense. But there were some interesting stories in it, and I
Mhm.
focused on the stories. And then I read it a third time, and in that third reading, I thought, this is not the story of creation. This is not our beginning, our total history. This is the story of the Jewish people. They descended from the Hebrews, and they have, or either they've descended from them or they've borrowed their stories, but it's not what we think it is. And so then when you want to learn to communicate with other beings from elsewhere, you have to learn telepathy. That is a language all of its own. It's the language of energy. And when you're trying to communicate a story, a situation, a point, you're trying to get a point across, or you're trying to ask for something, it's much more effective if you can think it, feel it, see it, and say it all at the same time. And most people cannot do that. And they don't. There are moments of spontaneity when somebody does that. They blurt something out because they're feeling it right at that minute. They're seeing it, and out it comes. Boom. And often it shocks people. That truth shocks people. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a not so good way. But those are very powerful moments. But that's all we have is moments of that kind of spontaneity.
Like transmissions, like divine transmissions.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I was learning how to communicate better with my own people, I had to learn the language of energy. And I kind of stumbled onto that by accident when I went back to start studying my dreams. And I have, like, since 1979, I have all of my dreams written, typed up, written form, so handwritten and typed. And it was in the process of typing those up that I began to identify certain themes and began to understand the language of energy. And so that is something that has stayed with me. The better I got with the language of energy, the more I was able to communicate. So then I come to a period of time, I think it was 2013, that was the year that my mother died, and then my sister and Dr. Levengood, and I lost my writing hero, and I lost my religion, and everything had clay feet, and it was one of those dark moments of the soul, and all I did was cry, for like 2 years. I did nothing but cry. And in that period of time, you come to this place where you have to examine, okay, what have I believed? Why did I, why was I not ready for my mother to leave? I know everybody leaves here, that kind of thing. And, why did you take my sister? That was my favorite sister. That was the sister that I was really close with, all that kind of thing. And then, why did you destroy my hero, my spiritual writing hero? And same thing with my religion. So in that whole process of examining, I got really cynical, which is a wonderful stage, not very comfortable, but it's a wonderful stage of being honest with yourself. And we need to be honest with ourselves right now. Right now. There's no more fooling, no more playing with illusions, no more chasing BS, no more getting, letting ourselves get all turned upside down by stories that are just designed to turn us upside down and not accomplish anything. So when you're in one of those dark night of the soul moments, you are accomplishing something. You're getting clear. You're clearing out illusions. You're clearing out the lies you've told yourself. The things that you wanted to be true that aren't, those are hard moments. So
Yes.
I came to be examining my religion, and I wrote up, I thought, okay, let me look at this story of Adam and Eve. And I go back to the Bible, I read the story of Adam and Eve, and after I've written down what I think the story says, and I could probably read what I wrote. It's like a page and a half of, here's my version of the creation story and all of that, and the whole story of Jesus and Mary and Joseph, and you'd probably think that woman needs to be excommunicated or something. So, because it was just a brutally truthful story that was asking us to believe some things that just aren't real, unfortunately. And the biggest goal in that whole story of the birth of Jesus was really we want you to believe that he was God. He was human. He was human. And why did they want us to believe that he was God? Because if they let us believe that he was human, and I'll repeat this next week too, because it's Christmas, because they didn't want us to think that humans could become what he had become.
Even though his teachings say you can do all that I can do, you can do. So
exactly.
Like it's almost like faking us out, right? Like oh, he's a God, he's perfection, you can't achieve that, even though he says you can, he's lying.
Okay. I mean, you sound like I was sounding a few years ago. Yeah, that's really true.
Penny, I always had such a mind to put together the pieces of the puzzle quickly and, get the prize for solving the riddle. And I right away was like, this is not right. This is all, everything is contradictory. Everything is hypocritical. And so, but interestingly, because of the way my Gemini mind works and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, I was like, ooh, this is like a riddle. They're trying to get us to go in and ask more questions. Instead of seeing it that I was being lied to, I saw that it was an invitation to ask deeper questions. Now, someone here is saying, oh yeah, I'm looking for the comment where she said she asked the questions, and
that's one of the secrets. If you can find that, let me just fill in while you're looking. Asking the questions and the ability to form the questions is really important. So
so this is where questions a few times in adult Bible studies, and I was asked to leave because I was told I disrupted the narrative. So I believe that the opposite is true. I believe that these puzzles or riddles or hypocrisies are in there like asking us to go deeper into inquiry. But then we have all these people that supposedly control the narrative, and they're too afraid to look at those things. So they shut the doors and say, no one, we can't have a conversation about this. We can't ask deeper questions. And that's the barrier. These gatekeepers that don't know what it is that they're guarding.
No, they don't. And they, I often imagine them. Have you seen those graphics or those, I don't know, they're programs where they show the Pillsbury Doughboy? They're almost cartoon-like. I often imagine those people who are stuck in the old narrative or in the Santa Claus version of Jesus and the whole story of our unfolding. You could just go up and poke that Pillsbury Doughboy and it would go, and that would be the end of it. It would just flutter around the room and sputter. And so I've gotten bolder over the years of just like Okay, say what? Say that again? You want me to what? That kind of thing. But that whole thing is really very interesting. So let me start sharing some of the symbolism.
Yeah,
And
please.
So we all know the story of Adam and Eve, or pretty close to it. Adam and Eve lived in the garden. They had everything. They were perfectly naked. They didn't have any shame. They didn't have any guilt. And then along comes this serpent, and he convinces Eve that she should eat one of the apples from a special tree. And that is the undoing of the whole human race, according to the story. Punishment, suddenly, consciousness, they're conscious of their nakedness. And God comes along and sees that they're wearing fig leaves and says, what's up there? How come you're covered up? And he knows that they did something that they weren't supposed to do. He knows that they ate from that tree. And so they get thrown out of the garden with a curse that says you have to work and suffer and sweat and, experience pain for the rest of your life. That's the story. That's supposed to be our creation story. It's like, OMG, who made that crap? Yeah. Yeah. So let's dissect that story a little bit, okay? So the first thing I'm going to say is, when you believe in an external God, all power is outside the self, period. So an external God means power is not in you. When you believe that God is within, then all power is within the self. And that is the main objective, is to make sure we don't think or believe or try to use anything that, gets even close to the power that we have. So that's the first thing. That's about inner authority. The second subject is that I just want to mention before we actually get into the Adam and Eve story is about gender. So when God has been personified as male, then males become God. When God has been personified as female, then females become God. So, and neither one of those is correct or workable over the long haul. So when God is understood as a state of consciousness, that's a whole different story. Then consciousness can expand and unfold the entire potential of the human, or whatever the form is. So that's an important, those two things, the inner authority and, getting beyond the idea of a gender. That's just, we have to make that switch. Okay. So God is a state of consciousness. That's all there is to it. Okay. So then we have the story. So Adam and Eve are living in the garden. Okay. They lived in a garden. The garden is a place where things grow and get nourished, and things that nourish the human. So it's an acknowledgement that at some point we were in a state or in a place or in a way of being where we were growing and changing, learning, being nurtured, unfolding, all of that. So along comes the serpent. Okay, the serpent comes along and he convinces Eve she should take a bite of that apple. And the serpent has long, for ages, for thousands of years, the serpent has been the symbol of consciousness. Why? Why was that the case? Because when the serpent moves, it moves in this kind of looks like a frequency, because it was recognized that everything was waves and vibration and frequency. And so the serpent became the symbol of that. And it was a wonderful symbol. And that was one of the mainstays of the matriarchy, which was what we had before the patriarchy. So the serpent moves in waves like frequency moves, and the ancients understood this. The apple, what was that apple? That was the main graphic symbol of the matriarchy. It was kind of like the flag. Like we have, you know, the American flag is 13 stars and some blue and white or red and white stripes or whatever, red and white stripes and a blue background behind the stars. That's our main graphic symbol of our entire country, our entire civilization here in North America. The Canadians have a different flag, different graphic symbol. Everybody's got their graphic symbol. Japan's got a rising sun. Russia's got a sickle and hammer or something like that. So the apple was the main graphic symbol of the matriarchy. The symbols of the matriarchy were then co-opted and redefined to mean the exact opposite of what they had once meant. And they stood for a way of life and a spirituality and a way of consciousness and a way of living civilization. That was what the apple stood for. So, you know, so Adam and Eve, you know, they take a bite of the apple. All of a sudden, what happens? They're conscious. They wake up. They suddenly realize, oh, wow, I'm naked. Okay. What does that nakedness really symbolize? It symbolizes having nowhere to hide, nothing to hide, and especially not having any power. You're naked. You've been stripped of everything. And they're being watched. They're being surveilled at all times. Okay, so then they end up getting kicked out of the garden. The matriarchal economy was based in the garden. That was their economy. And they gathered together regularly to eat and talk and socialize. And kicking them out of the garden symbolizes the complete destruction of their economy. They weren't prepared to live any other way. And so they get kicked out. So what do we have here really? By characterizing the serpent as evil, the budding patriarchal forces then built a new story of creation. They took the humans, Adam and Eve, and they said, you know, their whole way of life, their understanding of consciousness, symbolized by that serpent and that apple, and they turned them into something evil. And it wasn't really a creation story. It was a recreation story because it was a huge reset in that time, just like we're going through right now. So consciousness, you know, consciousness was vilified in that whole thing. An awakening of consciousness is something that we're going through right now again. Okay. And the Adam and Eve story co-opted all of the main symbols of meaning used by the matriarchy, thus destroying the social practice of working to expand consciousness, because that was what the matriarchy was all about, destroying the fabric of society, destroying the altars that were all built, and you read about this in the Bible, the altars of Asherah, I'm not sure how you say that.
Asherah. Yeah.
Asherah. Yeah. They were built in gardens, in orchards, in fields, especially orchards. And, you know, the goal was destroy those altars wherever you find them so that they can't gather, so they can't celebrate. So the whole thing, the whole Adam and Eve story is the story of how our civilization was destroyed the last time, maybe not the first time. But, you know, when you look at how it was done, first of all, it was done by taking away inner authority. It was done by messing up the genders. It was done by turning the symbols, the main symbols, into their exact opposite, redefining them, co-opting them. It was by constant surveillance, watching the watchers, and kicking them out of their gardens and their orchards. They didn't have any food stored. The garden and the orchard was where they gathered, worked, lived, ate, socialized, celebrated, etc., and cut them off from the consciousness that they were used to using. And that consciousness was originally used to keep themselves healthy, to live very long lives, and to create miracles as needed. When you go through the Bible, you read about all sorts of people doing all sorts of miracles. Why? Because they used consciousness. We have been cut off from that consciousness, and it's been poo-pooed and made to be something ridiculous, unreal, et cetera, et cetera. And so here we are going through the same thing again.
Yep.
Another reset, another co-opting of our symbols, another, gender reorganization, everything changing. The economy is the last, I'll say, pin holding things together right now. People everywhere are freaking out. The economy's going to crash. It's going to crash. If it does, we're going to go through a major reset, a reorganization, and we will have a new creation story to tell. If we allow somebody else to tell that story, we're screwed.
Wow, Penny. I love the overview and drawing in these symbols. And, my understanding of the Garden of Eden story is that it is, ancient mythologies from all different parts of the world. It's drawing on so many different narratives. So the sense that there is a collective knowledge of these happenings or these marker points or these resets, as you're describing it, and each one interprets those things slightly differently and tells the story slightly differently, but there's a lot of commonalities among them. And I agree with you that it is the Hebrew people that kept a very, very strong, intact version of that story.
Yes.
Oh, I've got to get hold on, you keep talking. I've got to get my plug in here because I didn't plug my computer in before I started.
Oh, okay. I've done that. Okay. Yeah, we have a whole, I'm going to say like a whole idea that that's the only story. And it's really not. It's just the story of the Hebrew people. And thank God that they kept at least some story going. And it has evolved in such a way that we moved from the matriarchy into the patriarchy. And that here we are now after 2,000 years of patriarchy, maybe a little bit more than that. I think the patriarchy actually began back in 1800 BC. So it's more like 4,000, almost 4,000 years of patriarchy. And the same thing is happening in the patriarchy that happened in the matriarchy. It became corrupt. It's now corrupt everywhere, and everybody can see it. And I think that's wonderful and sad and difficult all at the same time. When you see that the world isn't working and people are hurting because of it, it's like, it doesn't need to be that way. So when you look around and you look honestly at the world, you hear all the stories, and at least I do, look around and say, why are they starting more wars? Why, who's doing that? What is the matter with them? Why does that, that actually is part of the fallout when the destruction of the matriarchal societies proceeded. The goals in that matriarchal society were the expansion of consciousness, the maintenance of power and control, and the health and longevity of the population forever. And so people lived very long lives because they knew how to use consciousness. All of that was substituted with the acquisition of land. So now we're fighting over land. And the whole idea of wars and control and and power. And it's power that's not used with power. What do you call that? You're not power with, it's power over. So here we are at the end of the patriarchy, and the matriarchy, there are symbols and signs the archaeologists have found that go back 8,000 years. So, we might have had 4,000 years of matriarchy and then 4,000 years of patriarchy, and the same thing is happening. And I think Jesus came right at that point where, he was like, hey, we've forgotten way too much. And, it's time to wake up. And so here we are. And everybody's waking up. But when you look around and see what's happening, ask yourself, is this how I want to live? Is this the way I want the world to be? Where is the power that lives in everyone? Where do people stuff that? It's time to get it out of the closet, that's for sure. So we have some options, and we have some turning points that we're very, very close to. And I think it's time to look honestly at that. Where do we want to be 5 years from now? We do that in business all the time. They make you put your business plan together and say, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And most beginners are like, heck, I don't know. I just want to still be surviving and making a living a year from now or 6 months from now. But yeah, we have to think further ahead.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and think further ahead, and also look further behind to remember, like put back together our actual history and these narratives. And it is like putting together a puzzle or a riddle, because the pieces don't naturally all fit in a chronological order. It's a bit all over the place, I want to say that I have done my own analysis of the Garden of Eden story, and it's a little different. I'd love to. It's a little different than yours, and it started because I was very interested. I was writing a series of children's books about trees, and I was very interested in the trees of the Garden of Eden. So the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, and the fact that there's these two trees, and the one we're not supposed to eat of the tree of knowledge, and somehow it creates this, once we did that, it created this activation in our genetics that lit us on fire and put us out of, someone is saying here, Sandra is saying to me, the Garden of Eden reflects the Lemurian period. And that was when we were still in a collective consciousness. So we needed to go for a period of time out of the collective, as you're saying, the matriarchy, the feminine. We needed to separate from that and go into individualism. And part of what was the reset for that was eating this fruit. Now, you can say, oh, well, it's just fruit. It's benign, right? It's like that grows in nature. But if you think about it, an apple is cultivated. It is not necessarily, its wild ancestor might have been this big. Like if you ever look at wild fruit, you're certainly not going to get very high on, you can't make wine or ferment spirits out of like those tiny little berries or fruits that go on the wild. But when you domesticate fruit, it grows into this great big luscious thing on a tree. What does that do? It starts up the digestive system, carbohydrate metabolism, which opens up a different part of the brain.
Oh.
It opens up the part of the brain that is now in real high like analysis, the part of us that is very logical, that is very, suddenly we're aware of a lot of things.
Right.
And so it fired up a part of our DNA that caused us to see ourselves separate from collective consciousness. And that's where, and that's why it literally was the apple and the serpent, as you're saying. Consciousness is saying, I want you to have this experience where you're going to now be going into the gut, firing up this whole new metabolism, which is going to change your DNA. It's going to change your brain. It's going to change the way you look at reality. And you're going to go through some suffering because of that. Because you're no longer, now you're going to be hungry. What happens with carbohydrate is we get hooked on, we need more. Now we got to plant the fields. We got to grow grain. We got to grow crops. We got to have fruit. We got to have orchards. Our simple hunter-gatherer, like little, eating these little fruits, like in the Anastasia series, where she eats those little bits of, like a little pine seed and whatever, like, and thrives and doesn't need that much food. Suddenly we're cold. We need food because we've got this. So this is my thesis that I've been working on for, 25 years or something. And it's, to me, it does all hinge around literally what we feed ourselves. And that the beautiful thing about the matriarchy is that, we have designed these gardens and these orchards and these, abundant, nourishing systems, but they take a lot of maintenance. And then, if you don't have access to the lands where you can grow all that food, people literally starve.
Yeah.
And I don't think that humanity originally, in our natural, collective conscious state, I don't think we did starve without food. I think we could go for a really long time without eating much. So we're at a very tricky point, because to me, this is where all these power dynamics around, wealth and controlling money, it all started because the first civilization said, look, you need food because you're going to starve if you don't eat. So we're going to create these big grain storages. And then if there's a famine or a flood or a fire, you at least will eat. But now we're going to charge you. You're going to have to bring the grain to us, and then we're going to charge you to take it back out. And that's the beginning of all of this. That's how it all started. This power over, it's all about food. It's all about access to, because we started up this gut, which is
literally, that is true.
Hungry gut.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like when you're saying the apple is the symbol of the matriarchy, I think that came after this, or the serpent taught Eve how to make these orchards that would grow the fruit bigger. But now you're eating this food that is so high carbohydrate that everything is going to change.
Yeah, there have been, I think, a half a dozen at least big civilizations on the planet that, lasted for thousands of years and then died out for one reason or another. And then the resurgence. I've gone back 325,000 years looking to see what I can see. And what I've seen is that there's a big civilization, and then it's, I don't know, something happens. And it sort of peters out or falls apart or something. And then, 40,000 years later or 10,000 different timelines, it's back again. It's in a different form with a different kind of body, different kind of consciousness. And it's almost like each civilization is doing something like you just kind of hinted at, which is, here's what we're going to try. Here's what we're going to prove, or here's what we're going to develop and become. And so the different civilizations have had different goals, and some of them didn't work. And that's why the civilization died out. And that's one that's like, oh, wow, okay, that didn't work. Okay, let's try again. Let's come back and try again. And I think that that's something that we have to take as a recurring factor in life. We hit a wall. We hit, I'm not sure what it is in ourselves where we don't want to stand up for ourselves and make sure that we continue on. Or I don't know if we get lazy or if we get sick or if we get fooled or what. We just don't do what's needed to be done. And the result is a huge reduction in population. So, and then when you get idiots, people like Bill Gates and, Klaus Schwab and things like that, are trying to do everybody in, it's like, wake up, wake up. The Great Reset should be called Reset 2.0 because our creation story hints at, okay, somebody started us over again on a whole new footing. And here we are. So, and it may have been ETs. It may have been, just a natural slowdown and then a build up again. It takes a long time to fill even a small planet like ours. A lot of things go wrong along the way. Life is precious. So, and then look at, this message. If Adam and Eve didn't need food, then the enticement of a piece of fruit should not have really tempted them. I don't think that they were thinking about food. If the story has any validity in reality at all, I think they were curious. What's the effect going to be? Mm-hmm. So, my friend in Kalamazoo, he's one of the people who first edited my books. I would give it to him, and he would tear them apart. He doesn't eat. He just woke up one day and said, I don't think I'm going to eat anymore. And he quit eating. And I think it's now been like maybe 8 years. And he just, I'm like, holy cow, what? And he didn't lose any weight either.
This is it. People think that you're going to we see what happened in the concentration camps and stuff. Well, they were still feeding them. Guess what? Carbohydrate. If you go on a fat, like just a small amount of fat and protein, you can live for eons without, because what happens is when we fire up the carbohydrate metabolism part of our body, then it starts literally eating the muscle mass and stuff. It'll eat whatever it can do. Yeah. But once you get off in it, you ask the keto people, it's about 3 to 5 days of not eating carbs, very little carbs. You stop that. That's
true. That's true.
And then you don't need all this carbohydrate. And people say, oh, I could go without food. I'm not very hungry. So
that's true.
But people starve to death I remember reading a study about this like 10 years ago or something, where there was a study done. It's very obscure, but where they tested that people would starve if you kept giving them like a potato a day or a potato peel soup or something. If you kept giving them that carbohydrate, their bodies would waste away and starve. Yeah. But if you didn't give them any food, they didn't do that.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't read that study, but that sounds very interesting. And my own experience, I've fasted many times over the years, 10-day fast, 20-day fast, 30-day, 40-day fast. That has taught me a lot about what the body does. And one of the things that happens when you don't eat food, like on the 40-day fast, you begin to turn into light, and you begin, and I've often said in public even, well, I think, we're here to, we are an experiment. We are an experiment. So, but There's different theories as to what the experiment's goals are. And so one of the goals of that experiment is, can these people, can these humans develop the extraordinary consciousness without giving up the physical self? Because what happens when you start to not feed the physical is that the energy body becomes, hang on a second, somebody's trying to call me. When the energy body is coming to the fore, you end up breathing in, taking in light. You only need maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep at night. Consciousness expands tremendously. I got to the point where I could see right through everything. All the physical stuff, I could see right through it. It was all just light. Everything, including me, was turning into light. And I understood, I stopped the fast because number one, I had lost enough weight. I didn't want to lose any more weight, and that was not the goal, because I didn't have weight to lose to begin with. So I did lose some weight, but the change in consciousness was phenomenal. And it took about 3 days, maybe 4. And all of a sudden I wasn't hungry anymore at all, at all. Mm-hmm. And when you don't take in the material food, let's go back to what you were saying, you eat that and it gets into your gut, which is true. It changes your consciousness, which is true. Mm-hmm. So when you're not putting food in there, into that gut, and you're turning into light, and you're becoming this lucid, translucent building person. You're building this lucid, translucent person. Yeah. That there's no need to interact in the way that we interact. And so I found myself just listening to everything, watching everything. No need to interact. It was absolutely peaceful, utterly wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I was outside the whole circle of human social life. That was the hardest part of that whole thing. It was like, oh, wow. Okay. People, oh, come on, let's go to dinner. Let's go to lunch. Let's go have coffee. And I would just sit there, da, 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 da. I didn't have anything to say. And there was nothing. It all looked like just made up drama, which it is. But when you get outside that circle of made up drama, and you're just watching what people are doing, not only do you learn a lot, but you discover that you really don't want to be part of that. And that does stay with you afterwards. It took a long time for me to get back into being fully human and eating again. And gradually the light, it became less and less. I stopped being able to see through everything. I started needing more sleep and then more sleep. And pretty soon I was back to 8 or 9 hours. So,
yeah. Well, and I feel like, it densified us, right? It made us denser, literally in every way. It made the more this food burning machine that we've become, it's densified us, and it's caused us to have to be very much in 3D and very much like, okay, we're going to be so hungry that we'll fight for a plot of land to grow our food. And we're going to be chasing that food around the planet. We're going to be like hungry ghosts, right? But it was necessary. This whole phase has been absolutely essential for us to really get into the material density of the 3D body. And
that's the experiment.
That's
right
the
there.
experiment, right? That's it. And you can say consciousness, the snake tempted Eve to start going denser by getting into, hey, you can grow bigger food, and you can have it like, you have this little thing. Well, you can have a great big fruit, right? And it's like, and of course you wouldn't be hungry for it, but you'd be curious about it. Like you said, Penny, you'd be like, really? And then you taste it and it's like, wow. And,
Yeah.
that's enough to feed me for a whole month. But guess what? Now you're hungry tomorrow. So
Yeah.
and then we start losing these abilities. We got denser and denser, and even our sexuality changed, right? Because,
Oh, yeah.
it's also known that, those yogis that sit up in the mountains and breathe air and don't eat,
Yep.
they don't have a very high libido, because all the energy of that Kundalini is in complete interconnectivity, as you
That's
say,
right.
with the light. The light body is completely interacting and sharing energy, divine communion.
It's already, sorry for interrupting. It's already in that bliss. That
Exactly.
bliss you get like 2 seconds of when you make love and you have an orgasm, you get 2 seconds of bliss. They live in that bliss all the time.
Exactly. So you could say, why on earth would we have chosen to go down this road? Well, because what we got from this is individuation. Because when you're in that collective consciousness where everything is one, you don't have a sense of yourself. So now we've got an ego that has taught us, I am.
Yeah.
And the I am is the next step in our evolution. So we had to do this. We had to go this way. And it's okay. We'll live through it. We'll live to tell the tale.
We will. We will. And I just want to back up something you just said. That path, that individuation changed the brain. There's quite a bit of science that, if you study brain structure and function, what you see is that different parts of the brain developed at different times. And back they estimate 50,000 years ago, the brain was all right brain function. The left brain, which is the brain of individuation, has only begun to develop over the last 50,000 years. And that's pretty recent in terms of human development. And so here we are, perfect examples of that individuation, of that left brain linear thinking. And how do we integrate that back into what I'm going to call multidimensional thinking, multidimensional time, and cooperation versus competition? That's really the big task that's in front of us at this point. And that will allow us, I think, I hope, to be able to use both of those sides of the brain. Right now, a lot of people use one or the other. Artists use the right brain. People that are very linear and mathematical, not all of them, use mainly the left brain. So how do we integrate those? And what do we become? Does another part of the brain develop? Are we going to end up with those people whose head begins to, look like something, I don't know, like a hat rack? So we don't know. Maybe that was a high point of civilization. What caused our brain to get so small? So, there's lots of interesting stories out there. I listen to a lot of them. I watch a lot of them. It's like, okay,
Me too. Yeah. Penny, I want to go over before we wrap up. You talked about the symbology in the Garden of Eden, and I can't put my camera up because I didn't have my computer plugged in, and it's the same port that I need.
Same port. Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just going to hold this up. This is our beautiful, the lovers, right? The lovers from the tarot, which is the Garden of Eden story. We have Eve with the serpent and the tree of knowledge behind her, and Adam with the fiery tree of life behind him, and the angel Raphael. Am I right?
I'm not sure who that angel is. I try to think of those angels. There's angels in a couple of the cards. It has just this huge consciousness with red wings, often indicating that consciousness can leave the physical can leave the situation at any point in time, can transform it, can heal it, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
And I'm just struck when I look at this card by the balance. There's such balance. And like you say, the sexes, the genders, they each had a part to play in this whole drama of the Garden of Eden story, which like you said, is this a creation story? No, this is a story of a reset of where we shifted paths and went a different direction for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're shifting again now. And I think it would be a good idea to have some idea of what kind of world we want to have as we move forward. Mm-hmm. So we are not helpless. We are not naked. Okay. We are being watched. And that's okay. We still have our own power and our own consciousness to a huge degree, especially the people who follow, the alternative news. They maybe haven't put all the pieces together, but by gosh, they've put a lot together. And then those who don't follow anything but just look out at the world and go, hey, that's enough of that. I don't want that. That's really where we're headed. We need to come together and make a world that actually works in some that's closer to the way that we envision. So we can do it.
We can totally do it. And we are doing it. And it's interesting. We're going to be moving on next week and talking about the Christ story.
Yeah. The real story.
The real story. And, just to recognize that this is the time Christ said, I am returning in 2,000 years. So it is the time for this, as you say, the new reset, which is let's understand what is returning right now. Let's understand what is this Christ consciousness returning. Does it mean it's a physical being? What does that mean? And I think that's where we're going to be going next.
Yeah, right.
Right? to
exactly.
Just sort of open up that story and explore it a bit more. And as always, I encourage all of you. This is, I can see both Penny and I have those incredible, I call it the imagination. It's the imagination where magic is birthed because, and it's like massaging it with consciousness, with curiosity, with, well, if that's true, maybe this could also be true. Just residing in that, you don't have to know exactly the truth, but you start to expand into your perception of different possibilities and navigate with your heart. What feels good? What feels like, oh yeah, that little piece was so valuable, and it helps build a grander perspective of who we are and what we're doing here. So anything to add to that, Penny? And then we'll just chime in here.
I think over the next week, as we're getting close to the end of the year, I would suggest just every so often getting quiet and just asking yourself, okay, who am I today? How did I get here? Where am I going? And just come up with different answers at different times. Maybe 6 different versions of who am I today. Don't try to eliminate any one of them. You're much richer when you allow yourself to be paradoxical, which means to be able to hold what appear to be contradictory stances. Be that paradox. It's a wholeness that other people can't figure out maybe what to do. And there are some people that we want to not be able to figure out how to manipulate us. When you pick a pole, you're going to be polarized. When you hold a paradoxical position, then you're going to confound people that are trying to control without drama, without conflict, open conflict.
Well, because you become less predictable. You become less programmable. You're not there going, give me a program. because I'm afraid to operate paradoxically. You're going, no, I'm good. I'm going with what feels good. And Penny, I'm guessing you're like me, where that's how you've got to where you are. That's how you've been able to expand your consciousness and have these extraordinary perspectives build themselves over time in your awareness, because you could sit in that neutral point. And it's essential, folks. It's the same with me. That's how I've become who I am. I know it's true for Janine too. It's you want to be neutral in that you don't have to know the exact truth to get the gist of the big picture, right? It's like, and if you go, I gotta have the full truth because I'm terrified that they're going to get me if I don't have the full truth. It's the other way around. Without being too attached, you're a lot more, I want to say like a ninja. You're a lot harder to track.
That's right. It's harder to pinpoint, how do I control that? So, yeah.
Oh, that's a big drop, Penny. I hope you all just got that, like I'm sure as well from so many of the people on this platform that I've met. There's a lot of us that are like that.
That's right.
And getting more and more like that. And it takes courage to live like that, doesn't it? It's not what we were trained. We were trained there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And if you get it wrong, you're in trouble.
Yep. That's right.
So it's big heart work, everybody, and you're doing amazing. I'm going to take us through the the cards to go out here. Well, look at this. We've got Ascension Organic. We've got this beautiful 30% off the whole store. And I'm just kind of drooling over these Organite pyramids and towers. They're so beautiful. So check that out if you haven't already gone over there and looked at it. Also, we have Alchemy with Jay Widener, which is his talk from the conference. That's just so you can just, if you only want to listen to Jay's talk, check the link below. You can access that.
Yeah.
And of course, we're looking at Penny Kelly's website right here, where you can access her classes, her store, her ebooks, and you can find me. Where am I? Here I am at the Beyond Mystic consultations. Check the link below, and you can also use the coupon code below on the banner to get a 10% discount. Let's see what's up ahead for us on the schedule. Well, it's me tomorrow, folks. If you want to join me at 4 p.m.
All right.
Rumble, YouTube, and X for the predictions, the forecast for this upcoming week. We are, heading into the week of winter solstice or summer solstice, depending where you are, which side of the equator you're on. So that's always a very potent time of year. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. And then Monday is Beyond the News with Janine and Jean-Claude. So there we go.
Yeah. Ooh, nice lineup.
I think so.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we head out, Penny?
No, keep calm. Keep your eyes open. Keep your ears open. Keep your heart open. That's it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It's been such a pleasure as always. I love these deep dives into these topics where they're so rich, so much incredible insight coming through, and great comments, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here again next week.
Very well. Mwah.
Yeah.
I wish I could give everyone